As a creative aspect, TV is one of the best things that we do as a species. Along with music and film and books, they bring out the best creative of all of us. They entertain and they bring so much joy to many. They invoke emotion and enable us to feel things that we bury sometimes deep down. That's what this podcast is for. Welcome to A Million Little TV Shows. This is what I call the breakdown while I break down. Each week I will go through a different TV show, a different season of that TV show, and different episodes of that show. And I will break down not only emotions, but I will break down stories from my life, and let you know why these TV shows mean so much to me, and why I believe that they are some of the most important shows out there. This podcast is here to highlight a lot of smaller TV shows, or TV shows that don't really get a platform, because we know of a bunch of TV shows that get a multitude of different podcasts. Ted Lasso, Game of Thrones, The Office, they've all got several podcasts out there analysing all types of different things. But there's not many out there for the little guy, and that's what I'm trying to highlight. So each week I will go through a different show, different seasons, different episodes, and I will go across all different kinds of genres and different countries to bring you what I believe is some of the best TV out there. So I'm glad you're here with me. I'm glad you're here for this journey. And if you've watched the shows before and you wanted to come here and get an analysis on them and have someone go through them and pick out bits that you might have enjoyed, then I'm glad you are here. If, however, you have never watched the show and you just want to come and have someone talk in your ear about different TV shows, I'm glad you are here. But I hope that it inspires some people to go and seek out these TV shows. They deserve to be watched. They were made with love and care, and they are the same as this podcast, made with love and care. I am your host, Mike, and I will take you through every adventure, every horror, every piece of drama, and I hope that you enjoy the show. Hello there, and welcome back to this A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is now episode 8 of season 9, and today we are doing something totally different. I have never actually watched this show before, and very much like Loudermilk, it's something that I'm going into with fresh eyes. The reason I chose this show is I just like the look of the actual poster that came with it. It's a show called Saint X. It was a show on Hulu and it was done about 2 or 3 years ago. When I actually found out who was in it, I was intrigued because I actually like the actress. I think she's very talented at what she does. My first introduction to her was from the Fear the Walking Dead series, and as soon as I saw that she was in it, I was in, because I think she's fantastic. And her name is Alicia Debnam Carey. And looking at the list of things that she's actually in, I will be covering her again, probably in 2 more series. But most recently, she was in a thing called Apple Cider Vinegar, which got a lot of hype and was the talk of the town when it came out, about an influencer that essentially tricks the world because they tell everyone that they've got a secret cancer treatment that the world can get into. And effectively, she lies her way to millions and millions of dollars, and it's a pretty sad story because the person that she's sort of competing against, I think that's Alicia's actual character in that show, was the opposite side of that. She started to believe all these trends, do all these things, and none of it paid off for her, and unfortunately I believe that she died in the end. However, we're not talking about that show today, or The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart, which also stars her, and that I was intrigued about. So today it's Saint X. And so, I think we should just get into it. So, this is Saint X, the mini-series, episodes 1 to 4. Episode 1, A Lovely Nowhere. Now, as the show goes along, we don't really understand how the plotline is intertwining, but it seems to be that there are 2 timelines here. Or maybe 3 if you include Gogo's timeline in this. So what seems to be happening is it seems to be switching back and forth between the 2, and it's only till the end of the episode that you get the reveal that this is a story about the same person. Just maybe 20 years difference between the 2. So Claire Emily Thomas, played by Alicia Denham Carey, is the lead character. We see at the very start that she is living in the Caribbean with her boyfriend, but when she gets hit on in a bar by another guy, he essentially says that she's got a smart mouth on her, and when the boyfriend asks, is it because she has an opinion, this guy just kind of walks off. And it's a smart move, in all fairness. Like, just because a woman has an opinion doesn't mean that you should drag it down just because she didn't give you what you wanted. Like, go fuck yourself. However, Claire, or Emily as she's actually known in the show, or M for short, has been living in this Caribbean island for a while now. However, it seems that when she was a lot younger, around about 7-8 years old, she went to this very same island with her family. That includes her father, Bill, played by Michael Park, Mia, by Betsy Brandt, and her sister, Alison, played by Wes Duchovny, as in David Duchovny's daughter. And at the time, during that trip, her older sister was actually 18 years old. She's currently at university, and it seems that this is going to be the final trip that they ever take as a family. But at this point, they don't understand why that's going to happen. They think it's because the daughter is getting older. Unfortunately, at the very beginning of the show, we saw what happened. I think it was a dumb decision, in all fairness, to actually show what was coming up on the show instead of just doing the show. Like, I get a previously on, but having a basic quick run through, a trailer of what is going to happen in the show was a bit dumb. Anyway, so Claire, Emily, I'm going to call her Emily from now on. So Emily is taking this trip with her family. And while she is, it seems that her sister is overly popular with the boys. They're staying in one of these Caribbean resorts where you essentially get waited on hand and foot, and it seems an all-inclusive package. And again, like I say, this girl, Alison, is 18. She's very beautiful, and she has caught a lot of people's eyes. This includes two of the staff, Edwin, played by Jaden Elijah, and Clive Gogo Richardson, played by Josh Bonzi. And it's Clive that we keep seeing throughout the episode. His nickname is Gogo. And the reason that his nickname is Gogo is because during school, he was bullied because he had a stutter. And whenever he was sat in class, there were certain times when he would stammer over his words and say things like go, 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 go. And that is where the nickname came from. It stuck from then on, and he and Edwin have been friends throughout school. And at this point, we're unsure as to how he managed to get rid of his stammer. But it would seem that as an adult, he has managed to get rid of it. Again, I say adult, these guys are around about 16 to 18, maybe a little bit older, while they're working at this resort to try and obviously get some money. Gogo, it seems, has a girlfriend called Sarah, and they have had a child together. Edwin, however, is free and single, and continuously winds Gogo up about this, because he thinks Gogo was dumb for having a child, and also the fact that he seems to be under the thumb of Sarah. However, when we actually see Sarah in the episode, played by Brie Francis, it seems that they are having trouble. And whenever he sees her, he always seems to be cowering away from her wrath, basically. As I've said, there are several people who have designs on Alison. The two boys being two of them, but also some of the older gentlemen that are actually at the resort. And I say older gentlemen, they are probably my age at this point, but they have designs on this 18-year-old girl, including one guy, Todd, who was actually there with his pregnant wife. The pregnant wife notices Alison and points her out to her husband as someone he would be potentially interested in, but he tells her he's only got eyes for her, which is the right answer, but he ends up proving otherwise later on. And so throughout the day, the Cabana Boys, I suppose you could call them, Edwin and Gogo, keep coming over to where the Thomases are sunbathing. And when talk of a volleyball tournament comes up, Alison's parents tell her that maybe she should go up for it because it's always something that she's been good at, and they instantly sign her up. She is a typical teenager. She just wants to do her own thing, do nothing, do anything that her parents want her to do, but actually this seems to intrigue her, and she thinks, or it seems that she thinks, that the boys are cute as well, so she goes. But it's also here that Todd also follows and goes and plays volleyball with a girl probably half his age, as well as several others. She meets some boys who are actually on a trip just before they go off to their respective colleges, and she chats to them as well and starts to form a relationship with one of the boys, Tyler. And as the episode goes on, we see the development of the relationship between Alison and Tyler, they seem to be hanging out a bit more, and Alison seems to be enjoying her holiday a bit more now that she's got someone of her own age to talk to, but also she's trying to encourage her sister to make younger friends as well, because it seems her sister only wants to hang out with her sister being Emily. But of course, because she is having male attention from pretty much everybody, as soon as she starts hanging out with Tyler, it seems that everybody has their eye on her. Edwin keeps making very inappropriate comments when it comes to the Thomas family, especially them having a teenage daughter. And it seems that Gogo isn't exactly into what Edwin's trying to sell him, but with the potential of having issues with his girlfriend, maybe he could be into it. Skip forward to Emily. We see Emily throughout the show getting into a taxi. When she gets in this taxi, the driver actually says something just before she gets out that reminds her of years earlier. She looks at the license of the person who was driving the car, and it turns out to be Clive Richardson, the very same Gogo that she knew from years earlier. However, when she goes to meet her friend, she sits down and talks to her and tells her about this man, this Clive, and how he was potentially the cause of her sister's death. Now it's believed that he and Edwin took Alison away one night and raped and murdered her. And at this very point, we're unsure as to what particularly happened that night. But when Emily actually loses her phone and leaves it in Gogo's taxi, when she calls it and manages to find out where it is, obviously Gogo answers. And he tells her, look, I'm willing to meet you and drop this phone off. And so Clive obviously won't recognise Emily at all, because last time he saw her, she was a young girl called Claire. And so Emily is the only one going into this with eyes wide open. But she wants to find out exactly what happened to her sister, because it would seem that it was never fully investigated. And so we continue. Episode 2, Woman is Fickle. Now, just some amendments to the previous episode, because I got some things wrong. Emily isn't actually living on a Caribbean island. She's living in an area where a lot of the people are from the Caribbean. So that's why I got confused, because obviously a lot of the things that are around her are Caribbean themed. So makes sense. As for the man who is with his pregnant girlfriend / wife on this vacation, it wasn't Todd, it was Ethan. However, Todd is actually Tyler's father, and I mean, that fucker's a piece of work as well, so we'll get into him as well at some point. And so we see that Edwin and Gogo are arrested for DUI. They are swerving all over the place and just happen to have the police chief behind them, or at least a detective behind them, and he pulls them over and arrests them on the spot. However, this is the night that Alison died, and it has been reported that several people saw Alison with these boys before they left to go elsewhere, and now they're in their own car with no Alison, and they are drunk. So they've been arrested because they don't know where these boys have been or where this girl has gone. But at this point, Alison has now been reported as missing. And earlier on in the day, we see how this has all been arranged. So Edwin is quite the charmer when it comes to the ladies, and so both Gogo and their friend Des are both talking about how Edwin is. Apparently, a previous summer, Edwin had got into some trouble because he was flirting with one of the girls that was around the hotel. And the father found out and ended up trying to basically beat him up, I believe. For instance, Des says this father nearly killed Edwin. So he was obviously in a lot of trouble. But Edwin doesn't seem perturbed by any of this, and he continues his antics this summer, and especially when it comes to Alison. Again, we go back in time and we see how Gogo and Sarah potentially ended up together, because Gogo once again was a very nervous child and had this stutter. And so when one day he tries to speak to Sarah, who was in his class at the same time, he can't actually make it through a sentence without embarrassing himself. Now, no need to be embarrassed, but for a child like that, it would have made him feel that way. He would have felt shy. And unfortunately, of course, he was around other boys his age, and they started to mock him, including a boy called Keithley. And when Keithley continued to mock Gogo, this is when Edwin would step in. He and Keithley got into it and ended up being separated by the police officer that actually arrested them at the beginning of this episode. And throughout this episode, Gogo is reminded by people of how manipulative and how much of a bad guy Edwin is and potentially will be. Because even though they are friends, Edwin will lead Gogo down a bad path whenever he can. Later on in the episode, we see them as, again, young kids selling jeans that they've stolen from a store and are now selling for $10 a piece. And they have plans to go back and steal more and sell them as well. So they're entrepreneurial, but Edwin leads Gogo into so much trouble. And so back to the timeline where Alison is now at the resort. Alison, fair play to her, is trying to play the field a little bit. She's on holiday. She even tells her sister that just because you're shy back home doesn't mean you have to be shy here. You can be whoever you want to be. No one's going to know you after 2 weeks from this place. They're just going to remember the person that was here. So make an impression. Be whoever you want to be. Because Alison is choosing to be exactly that. She doesn't want to be the person who she is when she's at college. She wants to be someone different. And so she flirts with Tyler and she flirts with Edwin, knowing full well that potentially she could end up with both of them if she really wanted to, or maybe she's just playing around. Even when she sees Ethan during the volleyball game in the previous episode actually thought he'd scored a point, and Alison, who was on his side, told him that he was wrong and that it actually bounced out. So he ended up calling her a cunt under his breath. And so she just turned around to him and told him not to say it under his breath anymore. Say it with your full chest. And makes him realise that she has kind of noticed him around the place, as well as the fact that he's noticed her. And she flirts with this older man who has a pregnant wife. Throughout the day, Alison tries to spend as much time away from her family as possible. And she starts hanging around with Edwin, as well as Tyler, in 2 separate places. But she seems, like I say, to be playing the field. And so that night, Alison and Tyler are talking, and they're just general chit-chat, just trying to get to know each other. They start talking about fears. And one of Tyler's fears is the fact that his dad's a piece of shit. He tells her that he's scared of him. And we understand why from earlier on in the episode. Because when Alison's father, Bill, goes and speaks to Todd is just a piece of shit. He essentially calls his son a pussy and calls him out as being not very good with the ladies. And essentially says that he hopes that their daughter is someone who can push the relationship forward because he will never do it. And so after this revelation between Alison and Tyler, they both kiss. It seems like they're going to go and have some fun that night, but Alison says, we'll do it another night because I have to get up early with my sister. She tells him that she's going to walk back to the hotel and starts to be a bit cold towards him. She then heads over to a spot where she knows Edwin and Gogo are actually going to be that night because Edwin earlier on in the day has told her that this is where they go to smoke weed at night. And so it seems like they're going to be partying all night. Tyler, however, goes and has a drink with his dad, and his dad basically says, well, that's the kind of person that she is. What you need to do is take control. Essentially, he's one of these people where women don't know what they want. You've got to take it from them, which is bullshit. And he seems like someone who wouldn't ask for consent. And I fucking hate that. I find that horrific beyond belief. However, in the present day, we see that Emily is still in therapy after what happened to her sister. Seems like she's been doing this for around about 2 years and seems to be getting better. She basically tells her therapist that she thinks that she can go back to 1 a month. But her therapist knows that this is the time that you really need to buckle down because we're about to come to something. There's a breakthrough coming, but at this point, she's unsure where it is coming from. So she needs her to keep her, whatever it is, 2 slots a month to make sure that they get through whatever is coming. We as the audience know that she's about to go and meet with someone who is potentially the man who killed her sister. And so that day she does just that. She heads over to a restaurant in town that has been suggested by Gogo and gets her phone back. She tries to connect with him a little bit, but he seems very dismissive. He doesn't try to take her money when she offers and doesn't really want to engage with whatever she is doing. He just wishes to do the transaction and have her leave. When she does leave, she can't believe that she's staring into the eyes of a man who was so kind to her way back when. We see it in the episode when Emily goes missing for a minute. She's meant to be at a kids' club, but ends up sat on the beach playing checkers with Gogo. And this is when Alison goes over and is given a warning by Gogo not to go near Edwin. As much as he is his best friend, he is not a good guy and will get her into trouble. But of course, we know at the end of the episode that she didn't heed that warning, and it is potentially what ended up getting her killed. Emily realises that she's never actually investigated what happened to her sister. She's never looked at any articles, she's never read anything up on it, and so she begins to. She sees that both Gogo and Edwin were heavily involved in this, and she sees all the news reports about her sister. Apparently this was in the news for so long, over a year, that it was pretty much everywhere. But then now, there's nothing about it. Obviously it's 20 years on, and it's never easy to continue a cycle about a 20-year-old case. But of course, it being her sister, she doesn't want to see it that way. She wants to find out exactly what happened to her sister and how she died and why she had to die. But it would seem that even though both Gogo and Edwin were arrested, it wasn't actually for the murder. It was for the drug possession when they actually were found in the car intoxicated. And so now Emily wants answers. And knowing that Gogo is going to be in a certain restaurant, the restaurant that she met him in earlier on that day, she heads over at night. She waits for him, she sees him come out, and she follows him. Episode 3, Men of Interest. So we see that the cop who has always been in Edwin and Gogo's life remembers back to the night of when he actually arrested the two of them for drink driving, or for driving under the influence. And when he's speaking to a colleague, he tells them that he's known them their whole life. If they were ever arrested before, they'd get into the car and they'd be chit-chatting the whole way. He'd give them a warning, he'd tell them not to do it again, and he'd maybe put them in the cells for the night. But generally, he would ignore what was gone on. This time, however, when they got into the car, there was something absolutely wrong. We saw it at the beginning of the last episode. They were just sort of frozen in fear. They just looked like something had happened. They were crestfallen. And so the officer knows that these two were involved in this girl's disappearance somehow. But of course, when he actually speaks to his boss tells him that this can't be a thing. You can't have murderers on the island. It's just not going to work. We can't be shown to have this bad reputation. And especially when it's a white girl potentially being killed by two black boys, it's not going to look good. So they sort of need to cover this up. And we see that in a press conference, he does just that. The officer basically tells them that these boys had nothing to do with this. The only charge that is going to be put against Gogo is the fact that he was caught with drugs. He will be going to prison, but that is the only reason that he will be. And they rule Alison's death an accident. Coco, however, we see that he is having trouble because he's had to take his son to work with him today. Gogo, we see, is always having trouble, and in this case, it's the fact that he has a son with Sarah and she's not going to be looking after him that day. So he has to take his son into work with him. We see how the relationship developed between the two of them because throughout his time at school, Gogo had always been after Sarah, but she didn't seem interested at first. She always seemed to be more interested in Keithley than in Gogo. However, Gogo always had this thing about him that he wanted to protect her, and one night when he sees that she's having a distressing time, he shows up for her. And she begins to recognise how good it could be for her, having someone like that around, someone like that caring for her. Edwin, however, sees this as well, and he knows that his friend is only going to get hurt. She's essentially going to use him, and she'll probably end up with Keithley anyway. And so he tries to put a stop to it. It would seem that Sarah has an abusive stepfather, or at least someone who her mother is dating that is abusing both her and her mother. And so one night, Edwin turns up at the house and essentially tells her, look, I'll get rid of him. If you want me to get rid of him, I will, but you need to stay away from Gogo. When Sarah tries to fight this, he just kisses her, as if to seal the deal. We're not exactly as sure to what happened to this guy, but all we know at this moment is that Edwin is going to sort it out. And so we come forward a few years, and we see the relationship now between Gogo and Sarah. Like I said before, it's very strained, and I thought they were husband and wife, and it seems like they actually aren't. It would actually seem that Gogo's son was a mistake. He was a one-night stand between the two of them, and Sarah still has these designs on Keithley. However, Keithley is married, and so it's just an absolute mess for Gogo. He can't really wrap his head around it that they were together for one night. He is enamoured with her still. He's madly in love with her, and he doesn't know what to do to get her on side. And so even though Keithley and Sarah are having an affair behind Keithley's wife's back, Gogo continuously tries to stand by Sarah's side, but Sarah keeps rejecting him. It would seem that whatever was between them that one night was just a one-night thing for her. And this basically begins to fester between both Edwin and Gogo. When Edwin confronts Gogo about this, Gogo essentially tells him to back off, which inevitably leads to Gogo being left in town because it's Edwin's car and Edwin drives off without him. So it would seem that Gogo's life is falling apart because of this one woman, and Edwin is essentially losing his best friend due to this same woman. This makes him act a little bit harshly towards Alison, and while she's walking around the condo one day and tries to talk to him about what's going on, he just doesn't really acknowledge her. Gogo and Edwin also fall out due to the fact that Edwin believes that Gogo doesn't have his head in the game right now. Edwin has been asked if he can get his hands on some stronger stuff. They generally deal in weed and usually can provide this to the guests. However, someone has asked for cocaine and he just doesn't have the access to that. He has, however, by Des, been set up with a meeting, and he goes to meet this guy who is a full-on drug dealer. However, when he gets there, he is asked whether he will do certain favours for one of this guy's entourage. And so it's commented on as this kid walks in and then walks back out again that as he walks out, he's walking a little funny. It would seem that he has had to do sexual favours for this guy in order to get his hands on this cocaine. And so it would seem that he feels dirty, sullied by this. I don't know. He doesn't really want to talk to Des about it, and he certainly doesn't want to talk to Gogo about it. And so later that night, the one person that he does manage to not talk to about, but sort of take his frustration out on, is Alison. However, he isn't violent with her. I think they just have sex. And Alison gets a thrill out of being touched by this guy because earlier on in the episode, she actually talks to a friend of hers who she met on holiday about this whole situation with both Tyler and Edwin. She says that she has more in common with Tyler because he's an academic, he goes to university, he does the things, he's a smart guy, he knows things. Whereas Edwin she sees as someone who is a little bit older, he's lived a bit, he has done other things, he is worldly wise, whereas Tyler is academically wise. And so she feels a kinship for both of them. She wants to be with both of them, but she doesn't know how to approach the subject, because how would you? It's not very often you go on holiday and just go, I like both of you, I want to fuck both of you, and that's going to be it. We're going to go our separate ways, and that's going to be the end of it. And so, after whatever happened with Edwin, Alison goes and finds Tyler, and with a big grin on her face saying how much she's enjoying her holiday, she makes out with Tyler as well. So we can see that she's still trying to play the field and keep both boys on the hook. Back in the present, Emily is still trailing Gogo around. She ends up heading back to the place where she met him originally in this restaurant, and she buys him dinner. But even as she's trying to talk to him, he basically ignores her and just eats the food that she's provided and gets out of there as quickly as possible. At this point, we still don't know if he will even recognise who is sat in front of him, that it's Alison's sister. However, whenever she speaks to her friend about this or to her boyfriend, she tells them that she's investigating this, but her friend ends up astounded by the fact that she has sat down to break bread with the man that potentially, as far as she knows, killed and raped her sister. Her boyfriend, however, doesn't even know that much. He just knows that she's investigating what happened to her sister because she can't seem to put it to bed. But we see that even though it's 20 years on, whatever happened that night, Gogo is still affected by all of it because we see that he's constantly having nightmares about that night. Episode 4, A Disquieting Emptiness. So we begin to learn more about what happened to Gogo after he left the island. It seems like they're actually in New York. Throughout the episode, it becomes more and more apparent. But years earlier, we actually see how Alison's relationship with Edwin actually develops as well. So throughout the episode, like I've said, we see that she is really starting to head more towards Edwin's affection rather than Tyler's. It turns out, however, in the last episode when I thought that they'd had sex, that they hadn't. But anytime that Alison is on screen, all she is either talking about or doing is she's talking about Edwin or she is around Edwin. And so it seems that she spent most of the holiday with this man that she'd never met before. Edwin, however, is trying to cover up what happened to him. We know that he got the cocaine and we know that he has hold of it, but if he gets caught with it, according to Gogo, that will be it for him. It would seem handling a little bit of weed may get them a slap on the wrist, but handling cocaine is going to put them in jail. So Gogo's trying to avoid this at all costs. The only problem being is that because Edwin is the one who took all the risks in the first place, he is now asking Gogo to do exactly the same. And he hands him the coke and asks him to stash it for him. But as we know already, that's what ends up putting Gogo in jail. Throughout the resort, however, Edwin keeps using his charm on people. The only person who doesn't find him charming anymore is Alison's dad, because he believes that Alison has been spending the day with Tyler. However, while on the beach, he sees Tyler playing a ball game with his friends, and so realises that she's obviously not with him. So where can she be? He knows that Edwin has been making eyes at his daughter, and he ends up confronting Gogo about this. He tells him that Edwin has been very attentive towards his daughter, and he's just trying to garner information as to what this boy has been doing with his daughter, if anything. But Gogo defends his friend and tells him, look, that's just Edwin being Edwin. He charms everyone. He was just over there charming that gay couple, and now he's charming this other woman. So it's just him. It's just what he does. And there's nothing really to worry about when it comes to your daughter or any member of your family. The dad seems unconvinced by this, but realises that Gogo's loyalties lie elsewhere, so he's not going to fit up his friend or tell the truth about him. Back in the now, however, Emily is still following Gogo around, but now she's becoming more and more emboldened. She keeps going to the cafe or the restaurant where he eats, and she keeps bumping into him, and it's not at all subtle. However, she manages to worm her way into his affection and begins to talk to him about why he's in New York and where he came from and the things that he's done previously and all that kind of stuff, just to kind of lull him into a false sense of security. But as she is learning all this information about him, all she really wants to know is the truth about what happened. After a while, she feels that she gets a little too close to him and he leaves. However, the next time that she's about, he comes to find her. She thinks by this point that he has rumbled her and he has recognised who the hell she is and he wants to take her out to the middle of nowhere and maybe off her. But he's been having a lot of trouble sleeping. We know this from the previous episode. We also know that he is constantly being plagued by what seems to be the native island fairy tale of this woman who essentially comes after people from the island if they ever cross her. But what he shows Emily is the Statue of Liberty. He tells her that it's a place where he feels relaxed and where he can calm his mind and maybe then be able to sleep. He begins to tell her about his son and how he hasn't seen him for so long and how his former girlfriend, or as we know her, one-night stand, Sarah, has sort of moved on from him. We see throughout the episode that he constantly has contact with Sarah, and Sarah tells him that it's too late for them because she's already found someone else. Not only has she found them, she's married them, and she has been with this person for the longest time now. It would seem that after his stint in jail, Gogo just left the island and then came to New York, and so knows nothing of what the current island life is like. And when he confronts Sarah about who it was and how could she end up with someone like fucking Keith Lee, she turns around and says it wasn't Keith Lee I married, it was Edwin. And so now we see that Gogo is an absolute mess because the man that actually was his best friend for so long has not only ruined his life, he has taken his woman had him sent to prison for years and got away with what seems to be murder, but no one will believe Gogo for what's happened. And so, the first 4 episodes of this show were excellent. Like, such a murder mystery, and you can tell that there is obviously something wrong with what actually happened, and maybe that's going to be subverted. Maybe it was the young boys that actually killed her, but at the minute, everything is looking a little bit shady, because we know that there's several people in that hotel right now who could have potentially killed her. One of them being Ethan. One thing that I didn't cover is the fact that Ethan has spoken to Alison on only a few occasions, and on this one occasion, she comes up to him, she sits down next to him, she tells him, "Look, I don't know what's going on in your life, but you seem to be having a midlife crisis. That, however, doesn't excuse you looking at my ass all the time, so can you please stop?" And earlier on in the season, we found out that Alison's shorts had gone missing from the side of the pool, and it turns out that Ethan has taken them and uses them to sniff and masturbate to. So there's potential there that he could be in the frame for this. But with what Gogo says at the end of the episode to Sarah about how Edwin needs to confess to what he did and tell her the truth, maybe he's the one that did it. Coco might have just been the one that near enough took the fall for it. But it may be he's talking about he was holding the drugs for Edwin that night, and that's how he got caught. But who knows? Like, until the next 4 episodes. I certainly don't, and I can't wait to watch the next 4 episodes. So, it was very engaging, very interesting to watch. But I think what let it down is that it was probably at a time competing with something like White Lotus, which took the world by storm when it came out, and has also continued to this day to knock out great TV. Also, with them only having really one cast member who is properly well known, and is probably known at this point from the first spin-off of The Walking Dead, which by that point was starting to die off a little bit. I still loved it, but that's just me. So I think having her in it, and her being the only real name that was recognisable, or at least the face that was recognisable, meant that it went by the wayside. Whereas if they'd have packed it like White Lotus, I think it may have been overshone by the star power that was in it. So you either compromise on the story, you compromise on getting the names out there. And I don't think they compromised on the story for this, and I think it's excellent. And I'm so glad that I actually waited to watch this instead of just rushing it, watching it, and then later on watching it again, because I don't think it loses anything by waiting on it. And it's certainly a show I would definitely rewatch again. So it's definitely got a rewatchable value, or at least for the first 4 episodes it does. There's only one element that I don't like about it, and that's the fact that they've sort of brought some supernatural elements into it. And if the supernatural elements are the anxiety of Gogo, then that's fine. I can kind of get on board with that. But if it turns out that this is actually like them hunting for spirits or whatever, I'm going to be pissed, because I think that's just fucking stupid. But for now, I'm happy with the direction that it's going. Anywho, I'm done for today, so I want to thank you all for listening. I hope you're enjoying the show. I'm enjoying making it, and it's nice to see that the adverts are on the podcast now and kind of working, so that's good. However, until next time, hope you're all doing well out there, and I will speak to you soon. Bye. As always, thank you for listening to this podcast, and you could really help me and the podcast by giving a like, share, subscribe on all major platforms that you listen to podcasts on. As an independent podcaster, this will just help me exponentially when it comes to actually doing more things with this podcast. I truly do enjoy this, and I absolutely love revisiting these TV shows with you guys. So any engagement from you is always welcome, and I will try and listen to all of you when you give suggestions or just tell me what you think about the podcast. But once again, thank you for listening, and until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye.